What would you do if the janitor you defended, the one you trusted more than anyone, suddenly removed his cap and revealed he was the billionaire owner of the whole hotel? Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, because what you're about to read will feel like a movie. Lux Vista looked perfect in the early light, chandeliers spilling honeyed glass across Italian marble, front doors of polished brass, the kind of lobby that made people slow their steps just to admire how the world could look when money ordered it so. But Harrison Brooke had stopped believing that surface. For weeks he'd watched guest complaints climb, star ratings dip, strangers on the internet telling the hotel's story better than the people who ran it. Boards sent messages marked urgent. Investors nudged. Richard, the hotel manager, sent stiff memos about temporary setbacks. Richard had assured him everything was fine. Harrison never trusted assurances. He trusted what he saw. So that morning he chose a uniform instead of a suit. Faded blue coveralls, a mop with a frayed cotton head, a dented bucket that squeaked when pushed. He walked through Lux Vista's glass doors, as if it were the first time he'd ever seen them. Head lowered, cap pulled down. No driver, no assistant. No whispered introductions. Just a bucket and a task list he'd written on the back of a napkin. If the staff treated him like a nobody, he would listen like a nobody too. A bell chimed. The lobby filled with the small, complex noises of a hotel waking. A luggage trolley stuttering, heels tapping, the soft murmur of voices. He set the mop down on a tile, watched the reflection curl across the marble, and began. She arrived like a little hurricane. Nevaeh Robert burst through the doors barefoot, hair a practical mess, one hand on a giant coffee cup as if it were the thing that kept her moving. She fumbled a heel into place, then the other, her uniform wrinkled but tidy, in the way someone who cared about appearance could be when sleep had been short. Her smile could have been a marquee, warm, immediate, the sort of expression that made anxious guests unbend. "You're new?" she asked the janitor without looking up from slipping on her shoe. "First day. Welcome to the madhouse." He smiled because the word mad fit the lobby. Frantic, generous, slightly broken. "Harry," he said. "New guy." "Nevaeh." She extended a hand with the kind of easy confidence that implies you understand how to survive almost anything. "Receptionist. Babysitter of rich adults who think the world revolves around them." Harrison watched as she settled behind the desk and transformed, imperfection folding into perfect hospitality. A frazzled elderly woman approached, muttering about a cold room. Nevaeh's face softened. "Good morning, ma'am," she said. "I'm so sorry. Let me take care of that." Fingers flew over keys. "How about a complimentary upgrade while we get that heater fixed, and some fresh coffee on the way?" The woman blinked, surprised, then smiled so wide the day lifted an inch. Harrison continued to mop, but his mop strokes slowed. Nevaeh was doing a dozen small miracles in quick succession. Defusing anger, offering compensation without budgetary permission, making a man who'd come in ready to rage laugh about the priest who'd once sat through rehearsal thinking it was mass. She moved like someone who kept everything afloat by sheer will and small kindnesses. Richard appeared as if on cue, gray suit sharp enough to cut air, hair lacquered back, an expression that suggested he planned trouble before breakfast. He surveyed the lobby with the practiced disapproval of someone who measured work by how loudly he could proclaim it done. "Nevaeh," he said, voice varnished. 5 minutes late." "Good morning to you too, Richard," she answered, unruffled. "She's a mess," he continued, because humiliation was the economy he had invested in. "Our standards are slipping." Nevaeh's shoulders didn't drop. "If you want stiffness and perfect posture, hire a model," she said lightly, and the lobby chuckled. "We hire people." Richard's lip twitched. He turned his scrutiny toward the janitor. "You!" he barked. "Third floor bathroom is filthy. Clean it." Nevaeh stepped in front of Harrison with a reflexive protectiveness that startled him. She'd never met him before, and she already guarded his place without thinking. "The third floor cleaning team arrives at 7, she said, even-voiced. It's on the schedule. You approved it yourself, remember? Richard's face changed, red, then purple, like the color of someone who'd swallowed defeat and decided to bite it back. How dare you question me? He snapped. Because it's true, she replied. And I solved the problem yesterday. So doing what I can is kind of my job. Watching them from the mop bucket's edge, Harrison felt something tighten in his chest. Nevaeh's resistance wasn't theatrical. It was fatigue and bravery braided together. She didn't argue for status. She argued for decency. Then, as if confession wandered out soft and private, she lowered her voice and leaned toward Harrison, who still pretended to be absorbed in a particularly stubborn streak of dirt. People like him forget that workers are human, she whispered, not realizing the janitor's cap hid the billionaire's jaw. Her voice was gentle, laced with a weary knowledge. But people like me, we never will. The mop paused. The floor's reflection shimmered as if uncertain which truth to show. Harrison froze, a physical, jarring stop. The words like something cold settling over a warm room. People like him. People like me. In that simple sentence was a map of her life, the notch of fatigue, the small acts of rebellion, the hunger to be seen as human. He felt a hollow he hadn't known he'd carried. He'd been watching that lobby for months, but never really seen it. He heard, in Nevaeh's aside, everything he had missed, the human cost of a brand polished to a shine. He realized he had been measuring the hotel by balance sheets and PR blurbs, not by the calloused hands that kept daily miracles happening. A bell rang. A guest complained about a valet. Papers rustled in Richard's hand. Nevaeh turned back to the line of waiting faces and, like a conductor, began to orchestrate calm again. Harrison straightened the mop handle with a little more force than needed, his mind working in a way Suits had never taught him. Quietly, urgently, as if something was being decided. If he was a janitor that morning, his work would not be to sweep floors alone. It would be to listen. If this part already has you hooked, hit like, share, and tell me where you're watching from. The next few hours in Lux Vista's lobby change everything. Nevaeh noticed the janitor watching. She offered him a conspiratorial smile. When you're done, come behind the desk. I'll teach you how to manage the kind of problem that can't be solved with a mop. He wanted to say yes, and stay hidden and learn everything, but somewhere behind the suit he often wore, a man whose name was known on investment pages had decided to stay and watch for one more day. The mop moved again, his steps picked up. He had no idea how close a simple phrase, one whispered to protect another, would come to changing everything. At the end of the shift, when the lobby finally softened and Richard retreated to his office with his smirk intact, Harrison crouched by the service closet and texted a single line to his lawyer. Bring ownership documents. Now. That small message felt like the first true sweep of a broom through stale air. He had come to see the truth. Now he would need to act on it. He walked out of the service area and watched Nevaeh hand a rose to an elderly couple celebrating a 50-year anniversary. She had paid for the little cake herself. Small, brave things. The janitor cap made his decision feel less theatrical and more necessary. He had disguised himself to learn. The lesson had come faster than he expected, because in a few words, a receptionist had done what no meeting had ever done. She had made him feel accountable. And he would not be the man who left things as they were. If you're enjoying this, don't forget to like and subscribe. What's about to happen next will change Lux Vista forever. He watched Nevaeh for a long beat as she walked back behind the desk, rose still tucked into her palm from the Johnsons' anniversary. The lobby had settled around a soft, conspiratorial hush. Guests sipped coffee, suitcases sighed, chandeliers blinked like patient eyes. Harrison straightened the mop, tucked it into the corner, and let himself be small in the morning light. He had come to see the truth. The truth was not a line item. It smelled like coffee breath, faint perfume, and exhausted hope. By 7:30, the lobby became a sieve for anxiety. A convention of lawyers spilled into Lux Vista like a silver waterfall, cufflinks glinting, briefcases clacking, voices pitched to a professional high. They arrived 200 strong, polite on the surface, and entitled in the ways that matter. The kind who expect the world to bend and then complain if it trembles. Nevaeh met them with the same calm that had rescued the old woman from her chilly room. Ready smile, ready solutions, and the sort of humor that diffracts rage into something manageable. "One perch for each lawsuit, please," she said to a man who glowered because the coffee wasn't precisely to his scale of urgency. "And if anyone asks, the Wi-Fi password is forgive and forget. You can all share it in the spirit of professional compromise." The man's scowl threatened to fold. A snort escaped instead. Laughter is more useful than authority sometimes. Nevaeh used both with equal measure. When the first wave of complaints arrived, delayed check-ins, a cold buffet, a missing power adapter, she handled them like a conductor. She upgraded rooms when she could, discreetly comped breakfast, and where the budget didn't stretch, she improvised. A lull in the chaos was her workshop. She put an extra pillow here, offered a late checkout there, told a joke to a man whose temper was frayed, and sent him downstairs smiling. Each small act was like a stitch in a hole the manager had left unsewn. Harrison's mop made soft, rhythmic music on the marble as he moved between the upholstered chairs and the polished brass. He was supposed to be doing the banal work, sweeping, scrubbing, and making sure the lobby looked clean enough to be believed. Instead, he started to see the seams. A pair of worn housekeeping gloves jammed into a folding cart, elastic frayed. A supply closet with a light bulb that had been flickering for months. Old coffee machines with stickers peeling. A kettle propped on a burner no one had reported for repair. He imagined the numbers in a budget report. Maintenance postponed, raises delayed, uniforms bought on deficits, and then never replaced. You could read a company by its upkeep. This one read like a ledger that had forgotten its people. He crouched to scrub under a chair and noticed a name tag tucked under the cushion like a small surrendered flag. Miguel, housekeeping. Someone with hands that had strained over beds and vacuumed hallways. Someone who had probably never been invited to a corporate party. Harrison thought of the dinners he attended in private rooms, where champagne fizzed without a care. The distance between those rooms, and this mop-splattered life, suddenly felt obscene. Nevaeh didn't just fix problems publicly, she paid for small triumphs privately. When Harrison later asked himself how the Johnsons had cake and roses that morning, he realized she'd bought them. Not with corporate expense, with the faint crinkle of a young receptionist's own budget. A florist's receipt, folded, tucked into a drawer, half a lipstick mark on the corner. She slipped out cash from her wallet to replace a broken kettle in the guest lounge, because sometimes the cost of forgetting was a bad review that would cost the staff their jobs. She spent on croissants, on tiny bouquets, on small comforts that no policy would authorize, because policy wasn't built to cushion lonely nights. Harrison watched her pay for another thing that day: empathy. At the back of the lobby, Helen, a housekeeper with a smile like good weather that had seen too many storms, caught Harrison's eye and nodded him over. She whispered like a conspirator. "We've been asking for new uniforms since January," she said, low enough that the lawyer's chatter became a kind of surf behind her voice. "Richard says later. Later is still later. The heaters in kitchen 2? Broke months. Our overtime's been stuck. Miguel? He's working with a slipped disc, and he's scared to say anything." "You'll get replaced," Richard says. "You'll cost me contracts," he says. And yet the guest in Suite 3 gets a fresh robe when he complains. It's funny how priorities work. Harrison took in the map of grievances like a surveyor. Wages behind by 2 cycles. Equipment on the verge of toppling. A morale index measured by how often someone smiled without being hollow about it. "Why don't you all just leave?" he asked quietly, though the question felt like a naive sweep compared to the rope they climbed each day. Helen's eyes were steady. "We stay because some days it's beautiful," she said, voice soft. "A lady cries because we made her birthday special. A kid hugs the concierge because he played with his suitcase. The work matters. The money doesn't pay for dignity, but the people give it sometimes. She shrugged like a weathered flag. We need someone with a backbone, sir. Someone who sees us without needing a spreadsheet. Harrison's fingers dug into the mop handle until the knuckles whitened. He wanted to take that handle and smash a wall down with it. He wanted to write checks out of spite, to tear up contracts and throw them into the fountain. Instead, he listened. That was his new trade. Ears. Richard's cruelty had a different texture. It was performative, shiny, calibrated to create fear. He strutted through the lobby like a man on a parade ground, issuing summons the way others issued business cards. At 9, he made a show of reprimanding a bellman whose jacket had a missing button. The bellman, young and soft-eyed, stood rigid as a marionette. You are embarrassingly careless, Richard said loud enough for the nearest circle of lawyers to hear. Our standards are non-negotiable. Be professional or be gone. The bellman's voice shook. It was the elevator, sir. My hand got caught. Richard laughed, and the sound was the worst thing in the room. Brittle and small. Excuses, he said. No excuses. You're suspended pending review. Around the lobby, an uncomfortable silence compressed. The bellman swallowed, eyes darting to Nevaeh for some shelter she could not always provide. She gave it anyway, a quick, tight smile, a whisper under the desk. We'll figure this. But the whisper did not change the public humiliation. It was the kind of spectacle Harrison had watched before in headlines. Power performing itself as authority. He bent to mop again, and his motions were shallow, almost ritual. If this was a battlefield, Richard had mined it with small cruelties meant to keep everyone off balance. Harrison felt a cold clarity. This was not simple mismanagement. This was a culture that protected the top and punished the hands that held the place together. He reached into his pocket, thumbed the phone's outline beneath his sleeve. The lawyer's number sat there like a small weapon he had not yet unsheathed. Bring documents. Now. He tapped the message into the phone and hesitated over the send button. Not because he doubted the sentence, but because it had weight. Changing what had been accepted would not be comfortable. It would shake things loose and maybe hurt some people who didn't deserve hurt. It would also set justice in motion. Hit like if you want justice for hard-working people. Harrison's thumb hovered. In the reflection on the marble, Nevaeh laughed at something harmless. A guest's joke. A small victory. And the sound landed like a bell. Around her, the lobby hummed, people moving through the story of their day. The mop hum had a different rhythm now. Not only cleaning, but listening. He sent the message. Bring documents. Now. The send made a tiny noise. It felt like the first necessary move in a long chess game. Harrison straightened, the phone cool against his palm. Determination settled in his jaw the way the marble accepted light. Inevitable, steady, and finally visible. The lobby had the brittle calm of a stage between acts, chandeliers steady, velvet chairs refilling with new bodies. The lawyers' convention spreading into a second wave of clipped conversations. Harrison moved through it like a shadow that had learned to listen. Mop head whispering, eyes cataloging the small injustices he hadn't seen before. He had sent the message. Now he watched the wound he meant to mend. The wound reopened without warning. A man arrived like a storm front. Heavy shoes, gold cufflinks, a voice that assumed the world would bend. He carried an air of entitlement built from a long habit of having his displeasure answered with expensively papered apologies. The kind of guest who believed the hotel's luxury existed to validate his anger. This is unacceptable, he announced to no one and everyone as he planted himself opposite the front desk. My suite is a disaster. The towels, stained. The minibar, looted. I have clients waiting, and I will not tolerate incompetence. Nevaeh looked up, face creasing the way someone stitches a wound with both gentleness and speed. I'm so sorry, sir, she said, fingers already typing. Let me make this right. I can have maintenance in your room within the hour. We'll offer a complimentary upgrade while we sort this out. He cut her off with a hand as if swatting at an annoyance. I don't want upgrades. I want someone competent. I want standards. I want someone who understands money and business. This hotel's reputation is on the line. Richard arrived like a man who had rehearsed the right face for this moment. He skimmed the scene and decided his angle. Defer, bow, placate. That's how he'd always handled storms, by convincing the wind to change course, even when the roof needed fixing. "Mr. Hargrove," Richard said smoothly, sliding into the role of conciliator. "I will personally oversee this. I understand completely. Please accept our apologies. We value your business." Nevaeh, hands still on the keyboard, tried to keep the solution simple and honest. "We can move you to the presidential suite while we fix your room at no charge. I'll make sure the staff prioritizes you. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience." Hargrove's gaze slid to her like a knife. "And who do you think you are? Offering upgrades without authorization? Do you have any idea how delicate these contracts are? One negative notice and poof! Do you want that?" The threat hung in the air like a bad perfume. The lobby's hum dimmed. A guest stopped mid-sip. Harrison felt his heartbeat hitch, an animal pulse under the civilized surface. He watched Nevaeh's jaw set like a hinge. "If we make him whole," she said, softer, "he will leave pleased. That's better for everyone. We resolve the issue. The review won't happen. The staff keeps their jobs." Hargrove laughed, a dry, contemptuous sound. "But do you realize how much damage an angry client can do? Contracts, corporate partners, they're sensitive. We have a convention here. My firm expects perfect discretion." Richard's eyes glittered. He was a man trained to solve problems with the easiest tool: surrender. "You're right, Mr. Hargrove," he said, authoritative. "Nevaeh, you're creating liability. We can't afford that approach. I'm going to put you on unpaid suspension pending an internal review." The words landed like a blow. Nevaeh froze so quickly it was as if someone had turned off the lights. "What?" she managed. Her hands trembled on the keyboard. "You can't—" "Yes, I can," Richard said. "Stand down." A silence that felt like an accusation washed through the lobby. The lawyers shifted in their chairs, some with interest, some with genuine discomfort. Miguel, the housekeeper, looked up from a pile of linens, eyes wide. Nevaeh's face did not collapse. She straightened as if gathering every small dignity left to her into one deliberate breath. Pride and fear braided together across her features. She had defended a stranger, a janitor she didn't know, because it was right. Now she was paying for the cost of that right. She turned to Harrison, still in his janitor blue, mop in hand, and for a fraction of a second the world narrowed to the space between them. Her voice came low, not meant for the lobby, but for him. "Harry, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have defended you. I shouldn't have put my job at risk." The phrase struck him with a force that made the mop wobble. Those words, the same fragile apology he had heard days earlier, hit him twice as hard now. He felt an old cold settle into his bones, a recognition that the person who had stood up for him thought she had protected someone weaker than herself. She believed he was the powerless one. Something inside Harrison broke open in that instant. The decision that had been a slow kindling snapped into flame. He had come to listen. The listening had become unbearable. Nevaeh's apology was not humility. It was the price women and workers like her paid for the simplest act of decency. She was not allowed courage without consequence. He could not let it stand. But he was still a janitor in the room, and law and optics mattered. For a long heartbeat he froze, calculating. To reveal himself would be chaotic and could harm the very people he wanted to protect. To stay hidden would be to consent to another injustice. The moral crisis pitched inside him like a storm at sea. He had learned strategy at boardrooms and in late-night counsel with lawyers. Yet nothing in a corporate manual accounted for a woman being suspended for showing mercy. From where he crouched, he watched Nevaeh collect herself. She refused the theatrics of victimhood. Instead, she packed her composure like armor and smiled at the gathering eyes. "It's okay," she said in a voice that did not match the trembling inside. "I understand. I'll sign the paperwork. I'll take the review." The staff around them murmured, some in sympathy, some in quiet rage. Helen's jaw tightened. Miguel balled his hands into fists and then, with the practiced secrecy of the exhausted, went back to his cart. Small, invisible acts of solidarity happened everywhere. A hand across a back, a shared look that said, "We see you, we'll remember." Harrison wanted to stand up and shout that this was wrong. He wanted to produce proofs and contracts and evidence that the man in blazer and the man behind the front desk had no right to strip honor from someone who had only tried to help. Instead, he stayed small and seething, fists clenched around the mop handle until his knuckles hurt. The practical voice that lived in him, the one that balanced books and consequences, found its word. Action. He reached into his pocket, thumbed his phone. The message he'd already sent that morning had landed. Lawyers could move fast when the papers were there. He typed again, this time with less hesitation. "Get here. Now. Conference room. Bring ownership docs." He hit send. The message went out with a tiny chirp that was almost private in the roar of the lobby. Nevaeh signed the suspension papers with a hand that didn't tremble as much as the inside of her did. She looked once more toward Harrison. There was something like apology and defiance braided together in her eyes. Then security escorted her to the back office, a quiet corridor where the final indignities get administered with paperwork and the hum of fluorescent lights. As the office doors closed, a hush settled over the lobby like dust. The lawyers, loud with their own concerns, shifted back to conference mode. Richard's shoulders straightened into the posture of a man who had done what he must to keep the machine running. But the machine was rattling. Staff clustered in small knots, clusters of whispered strategy and anger. Some suggested walkouts. Some suggested quiet records of every injustice. Miguel offered to call a union number he'd scribbled once on a napkin. Helen's voice kept the group from erupting. She reminded them that practical moves could matter more than dramatic ones. Pay records could be assembled, schedules photographed, witnesses collected. Harrison watched each small planning gesture like a commander learning the lay of a battlefield. These were the troops he'd misjudged before, not passive, but patient. Not cowed, but exhausted and ready to be organized if the right hand stepped forward. He stood, the mop tapping the floor like a metronome. He walked to the service closet, pulled off the janitor cap, and let the air hit his short hair. For an instant, the cap hovered in his hands as if it were part of a costume that had taught him something about truth. He almost did it. He almost walked back into the lobby in a suit he had not brought and announced himself and tore the moment wide open. Instead, he tucked the cap under his arm and walked into the corridor where Nevaeh had been taken. His steps were measured. He would not be theatrical. He would be precise. He had already summoned the lawyers. He would assemble the facts, not a spectacle. But before he opened the door, he paused. A cocktail of fear and resolve settled in his chest. To reveal himself here, amid humiliation and paper and security, would change everything. It would also risk hurting the people he intended to save if he misplayed it. Outside, the lobby buzzed. Inside, Nevaeh sat stiff-backed on a folding chair, the suspension notice cold in her hands. Her face looked smaller under the fluorescent lights. Harrison placed a hand on the doorknob, thumb pressing against metal. His phone buzzed. A response. En route. 10 minutes. He inhaled, slow and deep, feeling the arithmetic of consequence. 10 minutes to craft the right move. 10 minutes later, the elevator doors slid open with a soft metallic sigh, and out stepped Thomas Vale, chief legal officer, man with a perfect tie knot and a stare that could silence boardrooms. Behind him came 2 junior attorneys carrying slim leather folders. "Mr. Brooke," Thomas said, lowering his voice. "Everything you requested is in order." "Good," Harrison murmured. "Let's finish this." They walked through Lux Vista's lobby together, and the shift in atmosphere was immediate. Guests glanced up. The lawyers from the convention paused mid-complaint. Housekeepers stiffened beside their carts. The staff, who had seen Harrison all morning as a janitor with a mop, now watched a man in a tailored graphite suit move across the marble like he belonged to its shine. Because he did. Camera style. The lobby froze. The chandeliers reflected on his polished shoes. His steps echoed with a slow, dangerous certainty. Whispers rippled in his wake. Is that? No, it can't be. That looks like... Miguel, eyes wide, dropped a folded towel. Helen clasped her hands over her mouth. Even the smug convention guest, Hargrove, straightened in his seat as if a new, higher-ranking predator had entered the room. Richard emerged from his office mid-rant, complaining to a caterer about napkin placement, when he spotted Harrison. He froze like prey spotting the shadow of a hawk. Harrison didn't give him time to recover. He stepped into the center of the lobby, reached up with deliberate calm, and removed the janitor cap. Gasps burst through the room like a sudden windstorm. One of the junior lawyers opened the folder in silent ceremony. Thomas stepped forward beside Harrison, spine straight. Richard's face drained of color. Sir? Mr. Brooke? Harrison looked at him with a coldness he had not used in years. Richard? What are you doing here? Why are you, Harrison's voice cut through the room like a snapped wire. You lied to my face. You mismanaged this hotel. You abused employees. And worst of all, you punished the only person holding this lobby together. He nodded once at Thomas. Thomas cleared his throat and read from the legal packet. Effective immediately, Richard Gable is terminated from Lux Vista Hotel and removed from all management authority, pending further investigation into misconduct, labor violations, and breach of contract. The caterer dropped a napkin tray. Miguel whispered, "Oh my God." Richard flailed. You can't fire me. I have tenure. I have contracts. Harrison raised a brow. I own the contracts. Richard paled. And while we're at it, Harrison added, turning to Hargrove. Mr. Hargrove's corporate block reservation is canceled. We do not tolerate guests who verbally abuse staff. Hargrove lurched to his feet. Canceled? You can't... I represent... Thomas stepped forward. You violated guest conduct policy 4B, Clause 2. Lux Vista reserves the right to deny service to abusive clients. Hargrove sputtered. I'll leave a terrible review. Make sure you spell my name correctly, Harrison said coolly. Brooke, with close to gratitude. Helen wiped a tear. Miguel quietly said, Thank you, under his breath. And Harrison, still in his suit, still carrying the janitor cap, finally let his gaze sweep across the room to the empty desk where Nevaeh had stood. Where does she live? He asked softly. Miguel, startled, pointed toward the staff hallway. Apartment building on West 43rd, sir. 1 block down, 3rd floor. Harrison nodded. Good. He turned to Thomas. Handle the transition. Lock Richard out of the system. Comp every employee overtime they're owed, and get maintenance on the heaters and equipment today. Thomas bowed his head slightly. Yes, Mr. Brooke. Harrison stepped toward the exit, cap still in hand, the symbol of a disguise that had broken his heart and opened his eyes. Before he reached the door, he stopped, turned back to the staff, and said something he hadn't said to employees in years. I'm going to apologize to her. I should have acted sooner. The lobby fell silent, and the cliffhanger hung there, quiet, heavy, electric. Would Nevaeh even want to hear him? Share this if you want. Bosses who actually listen. The hallway of Nevaeh's apartment building smelled faintly of rain and old radiators. The scent of a place that tried to be welcoming even when it couldn't quite afford to be. Harrison climbed the stairs instead of taking the elevator, needing the extra seconds to steady himself. For all the speeches he'd given in boardrooms, confronting the truth with one woman felt harder than any investor showdown he'd ever faced. He stopped in front of 3B, the number slightly crooked on the door. He raised his hand, hesitated once, then knocked. Soft footsteps. A pause. Then the door opened. Nevaeh stood there in a faded t-shirt and leggings, hair tied in a loose bun, her face still swollen from crying, but Harrison entered quietly. The apartment was small, very small. The kind of place that made every object work double shifts. A second-hand couch covered in a crocheted blanket, a chipped coffee table, a stack of unpaid bills tucked under a candle, almost hidden but not quite. On the fridge, a photo of the Johnsons holding the roses and cake Nevaeh had given them, smiling like grandparents she'd secretly adopted. A few Polaroids showed a younger Nevaeh with friends, her mother, a tiny niece in her lap. None of them recent. A life paused by exhaustion. On the tiny kitchen counter sat a mug with the words, "Do what's right, not what's easy," printed on it. Letters faded from too many washes. Harrison absorbed everything quietly, not judging, just seeing. "You can sit," she said, voice small but steady. She gestured toward the couch. He sat. She sat across from him, not too close, knees pulled in slightly like she was bracing for impact. "I should start with this," Harrison said, voice low. "I'm sorry. Truly." Nevaeh looked down. "You don't owe me. I do." His words were soft but firm. "I disguised myself because I needed to see the truth. My manager, Richard, kept insisting everything was perfect. But I knew something smelled wrong. And billionaires," he added with a tired half-smile, "rarely get told the truth." She didn't smile back. Not yet. "So you pretended to be a janitor?" "Yes." "And you watched us?" Her voice wavered, not angry, just wounded. "You watched everything." He nodded. "I heard the way Richard spoke to people. I saw broken equipment that should have been replaced. I saw staff exhausted. I saw you." He exhaled slowly. "No," Harrison whispered. "You were failed by the man who should have protected you. Me." He leaned forward slightly, not imposing, not demanding. "I didn't just come to apologize. I came to ask you something important." She swallowed. "Ask me what?" "Come back to Lux Vista," he said. "Not as a receptionist, as the hotel's manager." The words dropped like a stone into the tiny apartment. Her eyes flew wide. "Me? That can't... Harrison, I'm a receptionist. I don't have a management degree. I don't have..." "You have leadership," he interrupted softly. "The kind you can't learn in school. You understand guests. You understand staff. You know what real service looks like. You don't tolerate cruelty. You fix problems before they become fires. But you kept my hotel alive while the person with the title watched it fall apart." She pressed a hand to her forehead. "This is too much. It sounds unreal." He nodded. "I understand. So let me make it simple." He slid a folder across the table. It contained the formal offer. A salary triple what she made, full benefits, authority to rebuild the front desk team, budget for staff improvement, the autonomy to change policies. Richard had broken. "I want Lux Vista to become what it was meant to be," Harrison said softly. "And I want to build it with someone who believes in people the way you do." Nevaeh stared at the folder, then at her small apartment, at her bills, at the photo on the fridge, at her hands. She was quiet for a long, trembling moment. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Every time someone offered me something better, it came with a catch, a price, a lie." Looked at the numbers, the terms, the signature line. Her breath shuddered. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it. On one condition." Harrison leaned in gently. "Anything." "No one gets left behind," she said. "We fix the whole hotel, not just the fancy parts." A slow, warm smile touched his lips. "Deal." He extended his hand. She stared at it for a moment, then placed her hand in his. Their handshake was supposed to be professional. It wasn't. Something sparked, quiet but undeniable. Her pulse jumped. His eyes softened. She pulled her hand back quickly, cheeks warming. Right. So, manager. Yes, Harrison said, voice surprisingly unsteady. Manager. He walked toward the door, pausing in the hallway. She followed him there, arms crossed loosely, still processing everything. Nevaeh, he said softly, turning back. I'm really glad I came. Her eyes lifted to his. Me too. He hesitated. One foot in her world, one in the hallway. One part businessman, one part something he shouldn't name yet. He realized suddenly, intensely, that this wasn't just a business decision. He liked her, respected her, felt something shift in him because of her. Get some rest, he murmured. Tomorrow, we rebuild. She nodded slowly. Good night, Harrison. He stepped into the hallway, letting the door close gently behind him, heart unsettled in a way that had nothing to do with hotel politics. Outside her apartment, he paused, hand on his chest, breathing uneven. It's more than the hotel, he finally admitted to himself. Much more. If you believe in second chances. The voice that had once commanded boardrooms now spoke gently, respectfully, as though addressing equals. Starting today, Lux Vista is moving in a new direction. Eyes widened. Coffee cups froze midair. First, he said, everyone receives their overdue overtime pay. Today. A gasp rippled through the room. Second, new uniforms, new equipment, repaired heating, repaired elevators, repaired anything that has been falling apart. No more patching holes with excuses. Helen covered her mouth again. Tears spilled. Third, Harrison added, your new interim hotel manager will oversee all operational changes. He turned slightly. Nevaeh stepped forward, hands trembling just enough that only Harrison noticed. Sir, she whispered, but he gave her a small, steadying nod. Everyone, he announced, meet Nevaeh, Robert. The room went silent. Then, a slow, stunned applause began from Helen, then Miguel, then the reception team. Even the usually stoic night guard clapped once, firmly. Soon the lobby echoed with cheers, real, unrestrained, hopeful. Nevaeh blinked fast, overwhelmed. I'll do my best, she said softly. For all of us. And she meant it. If Luxavista had been a machine stuck in rust, Nevaeh and Harrison became the oil that made every gear turn again. Uniforms arrived in stacks, crisp navy and charcoal sets folded neatly in cardboard boxes. Staff laughed, twirled, posed in them. Maintenance teams replaced ancient heaters that had clunked and clanged for years. The suggestion box, handmade by Nevaeh's niece back home, was mounted on the wall. Ideas pouring in like rain. Harrison installed a staff of the month board. Fired Richard? Without consulting us? What is this nonsense with raises? Do you understand costs, Harrison? Sell the chain, take the offer. This emotional nonsense will sink the brand. Harrison listened, jaw clenching. But Nevaeh, overhearing one such call during a walkthrough, touched his sleeve lightly. Tell them the truth, she whispered. What truth? That people are not expenses. They're the product. The line hit him like a revelation. So he told the board, we fix this from the ground up. Staff first, service second, profit third. If you don't believe in that model, sell your shares. I'm not selling the hotel. Silence. Then the line disconnected. Harrison inhaled. That was reckless, he muttered. That was leadership, Nevaeh replied. He glanced at her, a little stunned, a little grateful, and something warm flickered in his chest. The real test came Friday afternoon. The lobby buzzed with weekend guests, children bounced, couples argued. Someone dropped a tray of glasses, and then Miguel sprinted up to Navai, breathless. "We've got a double booking, in Suite 709, 2 VIPs, both arrived early, both furious." Nevaeh didn't flinch. "Okay. Harrison, walk with me." She snapped into motion like she'd trained for this since birth. At the desk, 2 men, both steaming with entitlement, stood inches apart, waving confirmation codes. "This is outrageous," man number 1 barked. "We booked this suite first," man number 2 yelled. Harrison stepped forward, ready to intervene, but Nevaeh tapped his arm lightly. "Let me." He stepped back. She turned to the men with a smile so warm it disarmed even their rage. "Gentlemen," called. A vegetarian order accidentally seasoned with chicken broth. Guest furious, chef panicking. Nevaeh rushed in, apologized sincerely, offered a replacement, and comped dessert. Crisis diffused in minutes. Each time Harrison tried to step in, she met his eyes with a reassuring steadiness. "I've got this." And she did, every single time. Watching her work made something settle in him. Not admiration alone, but trust. Real trust. By 10 p.m. Lux Vista finally slept. The lobby lights dimmed. The last guests retired to their rooms. The air softened. Harrison and Nevaeh sat in the staff lounge, eating takeout noodles from cartons like 2 exhausted soldiers after battle. "You know," Harrison said, "I've never seen anyone defuse a lobby like you." She smirked. "I grew up with 3 brothers." "You learn quick." He laughed. "That explains the bravery." She shrugged, picking at her noodles. "I wanted to study hospitality, actually. Got accepted to a college out of state, but..." Her eyes lowered. "Couldn't afford the scholarship gap. Mom got sick. Bills piled up." "So you stayed," Harrison said gently. She nodded. "Someone had to." He watched her for a moment, really watched her. Strength wrapped in softness, humor hiding scars. A woman who'd deserved 100 open doors, but had been handed only locks. "What about you?" she asked quietly. "What made you, hide in a janitor suit?" He exhaled. "Loneliness. Strange, isn't it? A man with resources should never be lonely. But I was. Everyone tells billionaires what they want to hear. No one tells the truth." He traced the rim of the takeout cup. "I forgot what honesty sounded like." She looked at him, eyes gentler than he expected. "You heard it from the wrong person, then." "No," he said softly. "From the right one." A blush warmed her cheeks. She looked away. "We should probably sleep." "Yes," Harrison murmured, but neither of them moved for several seconds. Something unspoken hovered between them. Something warm. Something new. The moment broke when Harrison's phone buzzed sharply on the staff table. He answered. "Brooke!" A frantic voice replied. "Sir, you need to come upstairs now. The presidential suite, the pipes burst. There's water everywhere." Harrison stood instantly. The voice added almost hysterically. "And, sir, the hotel critic arrived early. He's asking to see the suite." Harrison and Nevaeh locked eyes. Not fear, not panic. Something else. Partners. Facing the impossible. Together. Smash that like if teamwork wins. The elevator doors slid open on the 15th floor, and Harrison and Nevaeh stepped out into chaos. Water streamed from the presidential suite like a broken waterfall, gushing across the hallway carpet, soaking the walls, dripping from chandeliers. A panicked maintenance worker sprinted past, holding a wrench twice his size. "Oh my God," Nevaeh whispered. The presidential suite, Lux Vista's crown jewel, was drowning. Harrison moved fast. "Where's the shutoff valve?" "Tried it? It's stuck," the plumber shouted. Break it if you have to, Harrison ordered. Do it now. Water splashed against their shoes as they moved into the suite. The devastation was worse inside. Elegant velvet couches ruined, Persian carpet bloated like a sponge. The king-sized bed sagging under dripping ceiling panels. The marble fireplace drenched. Nevaeh pressed a hand over her mouth. How did this even happen? We just renovated this room last year. Harrison scanned the ceiling grimly. Richard cut corners. Cheaper contractors. No permits. Of course, another thing his former manager had broken while pretending the hotel was flawless. They weren't given a second to process the disaster before a voice echoed down the hall. Mr. Brooke, is this a bad time? Nevaeh froze. Harrison turned slowly. There he stood. Benjamin Fletcher, the critic. The most feared, respected, unforgiving hotel reviewer on the East Coast. Silver hair perfectly combed. A leather notebook tucked under his arm. Eyes sharp enough to cut marble. He stepped into the hallway puddle, frowned at his soaked shoe, and scribbled something immediately. Oh no, Nevaeh whispered, barely audible. Harrison stepped forward, shoulders straight. Mr. Fletcher, I wasn't expecting you until Monday. Surprise inspections reveal the truth, Fletcher said, voice cool. And the truth, Mr. Brooke, appears to be leaking. He scribbled again. Nevaeh's heart dropped. A single bad review from Fletcher could destroy everything they'd rebuilt. The staff morale, the upgrades, the trust. May I see the presidential suite? Fletcher asked. Nevaeh inhaled sharply. Harrison turned to her. She shook her head subtly. We can't. Not like this. Harrison turned back. Mr. Fletcher, the suite is undergoing maintenance. It won't be available. What a shame. Fletcher flipped a page in his notebook. This hotel's rating depends heavily on the state of your signature rooms. Nevaeh stepped forward gently. We would be happy to offer you refreshments while... Ms. Robert, Fletcher cut in politely but sharply. I do not review refreshments. I review hotels, rooms, service, and situations like... He gestured to the flood behind them. This. A death sentence. Unless... Harrison inhaled slowly. Then he made a decision that stunned even himself. Mr. Fletcher, he said, clearing his throat, if you insist on evaluating a signature-grade space, I have another option. Fletcher raised a brow. I'm listening. Harrison turned to Nevaeh. Their eyes met. She understood instantly, and her breath caught. No, Harrison, you don't have to... Yes, he said quietly. I do. He looked back at the critic. You can stay in my private penthouse. The hallway fell silent. Even the dripping water seemed to pause. Fletcher blinked, stunned for the first time. Your penthouse? He repeated. Yes, fully furnished, staff-ready with a panoramic skyline view. It's the most luxurious space in the building. Nevaeh stared at Harrison, shocked, almost moved to tears. His penthouse wasn't a room. It wasn't an asset. It was his sanctuary, his escape from the world, his only private refuge. Offering it wasn't a gesture. It was a sacrifice. Fletcher closed his notebook. Very well. I'd like to see it. Nevaeh, Pla's staff prepare the penthouse. They rushed to the penthouse floor. Harrison unlocked the door, and instantly, Nevaeh felt like she'd stepped into his soul. Warm lighting, dark walnut shelves lined with books, a grand piano in the corner. Framed photographs, Harrison at age 7 with his mother, Harrison at a charity gala, Harrison traveling alone in Europe years ago. Nevaeh swallowed. Wow. It wasn't grand because of the wealth. It was grand because it was personal. Okay, she snapped into manager mode. Team, we need to convert this into a hotel-ready suite. Miguel nodded sharply. On it. Helen ran for linens. Maintenance brought tools. Front desk fetched toiletries. Nevaeh moved through the space with grace, her hands plumping pillows, smoothing sheets, rearranging the rug, adjusting lighting. She directed the team like she'd been managing hotels her entire life. Harrison stood quietly in the doorway, watching her work. She opened his closet to check storage space, then paused. Inside hung his suits, perfectly organized. On the top shelf, a shoebox filled with handwritten letters and a single child's drawing. Nevaeh froze, touched by the delicacy of what she'd found. When she turned, Harrison was behind her. "Sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." "It's okay," he said softly, his eyes lowered to the box. "That's the last thing I have from my mother. She died when I was young." Nevaeh's breath caught. "I didn't know." "No one does." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open between them, something tender and surprisingly fragile. She closed the closet gently. "I'll take extra care of everything." "I trust you," Harrison said quietly. Her cheeks warmed. 2 hours later, the penthouse gleamed like a world-class designer had handcrafted it on the spot. Fletcher walked in slowly, scanning every corner with the intensity of a surgeon diagnosing a patient. He touched the marble countertop, inspected the bathroom fixtures, checked the window seals, even tested the firmness of the pillows. The staff held their breath. Finally, he looked at Harrison. "This," Fletcher said, "is exceptional." Nevaeh exhaled, shoulders sinking in pure relief. Harrison nodded politely. "Thank you." Fletcher added, "I will stay here tonight, and I expect breakfast precisely at 7. "Of course," Nevaeh said quickly. "We'll make sure everything is perfect." Fletcher offered a clipped nod and vanished into the penthouse, closing the door behind him. The entire staff sagged like deflated balloons, then burst into quiet cheers. Miguel wiped his forehead. "Saints preserve us. That man is terrifying." Helen hugged Nevaeh. "You saved us. Again." Nevaeh laughed, flushed and breathless. "No way, we all did it." Harrison's eyes were on her, soft with admiration deeper than gratitude. "You were incredible," he said. She shrugged. "We make a good team." "We do," he replied, his voice lower, warmer. Their eyes held for a long, charged moment. Something shifted, something undeniable. Later, after staff dispersed and the halls quieted, the two of them walked toward the elevator. It felt different now, like the world around them had softened. "You realize," Nevaeh said teasingly, "you gave up your home for a critic." Harrison chuckled. "I'll survive. Besides, it's strangely nice, seeing people in my space, seeing you there." Her heart fluttered. He hesitated, then spoke gently. "Nevaeh, would you like to have dinner with me tonight?" She froze, then smiled, slow, warm, a little nervous. "Yes," she breathed. "I would." The elevator dinged open. They stepped in side by side, shoulders almost touching, hearts hammering louder than the elevator cables. Something new was beginning. And they both felt it. Drop a love emoji if you're rooting for them. The moment Harrison stepped into his temporary suite, a standard executive room now that his penthouse belonged to a critic, reality hit him like a punch to the ribs. He had asked Nevaeh to dinner. Nevaeh, the woman who'd challenged him, protected him, worked beside him, changed his entire hotel, and, if he was honest, changed him. For the first time in years, the billionaire who negotiated mergers worth billions panicked over a shirt button. "Is this too formal?" He tossed the shirt onto the bed. "Too casual?" Another shirt flew across the room. He checked the mirror for the 15th time, straightened his tie, removed it, replaced it, removed it again. He groaned. "This is ridiculous." On the other side of the city, in her tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper and a flickering lamp, Nevaeh stood in front of her mirror with the exact same expression. "Why am I nervous?" she muttered. This was Harrison Brooke, her boss. Her partner in rebuilding Lux Vista. A man who had looked at her, really looked at her, in the penthouse earlier, as if she were something rare. She slipped into a simple navy dress she hadn't worn in years. Her hair fell in soft waves. Her makeup was light. Her hands trembled. "What are you doing, Nevaeh?" she whispered. "Don't overthink it." But it was impossible not to overthink when the doorbell rang. She inhaled deeply, opened the door, and froze. Harrison stood there in a charcoal suit, no tie, hair slightly tousled, eyes warm with a softness she'd never seen before. He looked human, vulnerable, nervous. "You look," his voice faltered, "beautiful." Her cheeks heated. "You clean up pretty well yourself." They laughed awkwardly, and it somehow steadied them. As they walked out together, their hands brushed once, sending a small electric jolt through both of them. Harrison opened the car door for her, a gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Yeah, ready." Neither of them were. The restaurant Harrison chose was tucked into a quiet street corner. Warm lighting, small tables, candles flickering like whispered secrets. Soft jazz curled through the air. It felt nothing like the corporate meetings he was used to. And nothing like the break room lunches she usually ate. They were escorted to a table by the window. Nevaeh looked around. "This place is... wow." Harrison smiled. "It's my favorite. No cameras, no press, just good food." "And good company?" she teased. He swallowed. "Hopefully." A waiter poured them wine, and conversation flowed, first light and playful. They joked about hotel mishaps. Nevaeh admitted she was terrified of elevators until age 16. Harrison confessed a secret hatred of clowns. She admitted she burned microwave popcorn every single time. He admitted he once bought a $20,000 modern art sculpture, believing it was a lamp. "Did it light up?" she asked. "It melted when I put a bulb in it." She laughed so loudly half the restaurant turned. "Don't judge me," Harrison groaned. "Oh, trust me," she giggled, wiping tears. "I'm judging." The ease between them grew like gravity, subtle but undeniable. Then the conversation shifted. The candlelight softened. The laughter faded into something quieter, more personal. Harrison leaned back, studying the wine in his glass. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "Of course." "It's, strange. I run a hotel empire. I've built things, broken things, fixed things. But I've never," he inhaled, "I've never felt seen the way I have these past few days." Her brows softened. "Seen?" "Not as a billionaire. Not as some untouchable figure. You treated me like a person, even when you thought I was a janitor." She smiled faintly. "You were a janitor. Just a very rich one." He chuckled, then grew serious. "The truth is, I've been lonely, Nevaeh. For a very long time." Her heart tugged. She whispered, "Me too." He looked up sharply. "I've spent years in jobs where promises didn't mean anything," she said softly. "Bosses who said they'd help, but never did. Men who said they'd stay, but didn't." Her fingers tightened around her napkin. "So I learned to rely only on myself. And even now, even with this opportunity, I'm scared." He leaned closer. "Of what?" "Of trusting the wrong person again." His chest tightened. He reached across the table slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their fingers touched lightly, then intertwined. "Nevaeh," he said quietly, "I don't want to be another broken promise." Her breath trembled. This was the moment. The fragile, terrifying, beautiful space between two hearts that both wanted and feared the same thing. "Can I be honest with you?" Neve whispered. "Please." I like you, Harrison. More than I should. More than I planned to. And I know it's complicated, and risky and maybe stupid, but..." He cut her off gently. "It's not stupid." Their eyes locked. Her pulse raced. He leaned in slowly, gently, a question in his gaze. Nevaeh felt her breath catch, then she whispered the line that stole the air from his lungs. "Don't hesitate. Just kiss me." He inhaled sharply. Then he did. Soft, careful, a kiss that tasted like relief and possibility, the promise of something real. Nevaeh's hand slid to his jaw. Harrison's fingers brushed her cheek. It wasn't hungry. It wasn't rushed. It was transformative, the kind of kiss that shifts the axis of a life. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you defended me," Harrison whispered. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you spilled mop water on your shoes," she teased. They laughed quietly, foreheads touching. As they walked out of the restaurant, the night breeze cool against warm cheeks, Harrison slipped his hand into hers naturally. But she paused. "Harrison," she said gently, "we work together. We need to be careful." "I know," he replied. "We can't let this affect the staff or the hotel." "I know. And we have to stay professional when we're on duty." He smiled slowly. "I can do professional." She raised a brow. "I've seen you mop." "Okay, that was uncalled for." They laughed again, soft, warm, connected. He squeezed her hand lightly. "So, what does this mean?" he asked. Nevaeh met his eyes. "It means," she said, "that something is growing between us. Something real. And we'll figure it out. Together." He exhaled, relief washing over him. "Together," he repeated. They returned to Lux Vista, still smiling. But as they stepped into the lobby, Miguel rushed up, waving his phone anxiously. "Boss, Nevaeh, you need to see this." They both leaned in. On the screen were 3 words that made their stomachs drop. "Review publishes tomorrow." Benjamin Fletcher's verdict. The one that could rebuild Lux Vista, or destroy it. Harrison and Nevaeh exchanged a look. Equal parts fear and determination. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Subscribe and comment the city where you want to see their love story next. If you want the next chapter, 5-star dawn and new beginnings, just say, "Continue the story." The morning Benjamin Fletcher's review went live, Lux Vista felt still. Too still, like the entire hotel was holding its breath. The staff gathered in the lobby long before sunrise. Helen clutched her rosary. Miguel whispered prayers. Even the security team hovered nervously around the front desk, eyes glued to the hotel's official tablet. Nevaeh stood in the center of it all, heartbeat in her throat, palms sweating. Harrison stood beside her, close enough for comfort yet keeping enough distance to maintain professionalism, at least in front of the staff. A notification dinged. Helen gasped. Miguel nearly dropped the tablet. Harrison and Nevaeh locked eyes. "This is it." Nevaeh tapped the screen, and the headline appeared in bold, shining letters. "A reborn luxury, Lux Vista returns to 5-star glory." Benjamin Fletcher. The lobby erupted. "He said 5 stars! 5!" Miguel shouted. Helen started crying into her apron. Staff cheered, clapped, hugged each other. But Harrison reached for the tablet with trembling fingers. "Scroll," he murmured. Nevaeh did. Fletcher's review was glowing, unbelievably glowing, almost poetic. Lux Vista has undergone a transformation not of architecture, but of soul. Leadership has shifted from authoritative to human-centered, a rare and admirable evolution. The interim manager, Ms. Nevaeh Robert, demonstrates a mastery of crisis management, empathy, and guest relations far surpassing her title. Harrison Brooks' bold, hands-on approach to reconnection with staff sets a new industry standard. Nevaeh covered her mouth. He mentioned me by name. Harrison stared at the screen like he might burst from pride. He didn't just mention you, he whispered. He credited you. She blinked fast. Oh my God, Helen grabbed Nevaeh into a hug. The Lord is good, she shouted. My baby girl is famous. Miguel fist-bumped Harrison. Boss, you did it. Harrison shook his head gently. We did it. The hotel's PA system chimed with a cheerful tone. The front desk phone started ringing non-stop. Future reservations flooded in. Lux Vista was saved. Not just saved, reborn. And everyone knew exactly who had sparked the transformation. By noon, the board demanded an emergency video meeting. Harrison and Nevaeh sat side by side in the conference room, shoulders nearly brushing, professionalism radiating from both. The screen displayed 6 board members, all of whom looked suspiciously eager. Mr. Brooke, said Chairman Walters, clearing his throat, we want to congratulate you. Harrison raised a brow. Do you? Indeed. Walters straightened his tie. This review is extraordinary, and the spike in bookings, well, numbers don't lie. Another board member chimed in. Your new operational strategy, empowering staff, reinvesting in maintenance, transparent communication, seems to be working. Seems? Nevaeh muttered under her breath. Harrison smirked. Walters continued. We also understand you turned down 2 purchase offers for the hotel. I did, Harrison confirmed. Well, the chairman sighed. We stand behind that decision now. Nevaeh's breath caught. Walters added, and regarding your interim manager, Ms. Robert, we support your proposal to make her permanent. The entire room froze. Nevaeh jerked her head toward Harrison. You proposed? He stayed calm, but his eyes softened. Yes, Walters nodded. We approve. Effective immediately. Nevaeh blinked rapidly, speechless. Harrison leaned forward, voice steady. Then we're agreed. Lux Vista stays ours, and Nevaeh takes her rightful place. The board voted unanimously. Harrison ended the call. The instant the screen blinked off, Nevaeh burst. You offered me the full position? Without asking? He lifted his hands. I was going to ask, but then Fletcher's review came out, and her eyes glistened. Harrison, thank you. You earned it, he said. Not because of me, because of you. Her voice broke. Still, thank you. The days that followed felt magical. Paychecks increased. Miguel's overtime finally showed. He bought new shoes and insisted on showing everyone individually. The heater was fixed. Mrs. Harrison, the sweet elderly guest from earlier, returned with cookies. Uniforms arrived in full sets. Staff strutted through the halls like fashion models. Nevaeh created a staff choice trip fund. Helen voted for a beach picnic. Miguel voted for Disneyland. Security voted for a barbecue. They settled on an amusement park. Guest satisfaction soared. Complaints dropped. Employees smiled again. Real smiles, not forced ones. And slowly, Lux Vista transformed from a struggling hotel into a family. Whenever staff needed something, they went to Nevaeh. Whenever Nevaeh needed backup, she went to Harrison. Their partnership was seamless, efficient, comfortable, dangerously natural. Rumors circulated, of course, whispers in break rooms, lingering looks. But Harrison and Nevaeh remained professional in public, even though every stolen glance held a spark. One quiet evening, after the lobby cleared and the lights dimmed, Harrison found Nevaeh organizing the new suggestion box files. She looked tired, but peaceful. "You should be home," he said gently. "So should you." He stepped closer. "I wanted to talk to you." She straightened, brushing dust from her skirt. "What's up?" He hesitated. Words suddenly felt far heavier than usual. "I've been thinking," he said, "about us, about this place, about everything." Her breath hitched, and I realized something. He paused, then smiled softly. "I can't run this hotel without you." She laughed nervously. "You mean professionally?" "Professionally," he said, then took a careful step forward. "And maybe, not just professionally." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Harrison," she whispered. He slipped one hand into his pocket, pulling out a small, engraved nameplate. She took it with trembling fingers. Nevaeh Robert, General Manager, Lux Vista Hotel, Partner. The last word nearly made her knees give out. Her eyes filled instantly. "Partner?" she echoed, voice cracking. He nodded once, voice low. "In every way you'll allow." Silence wrapped around them like velvet. Then she threw her arms around him. Harrison froze, then melted into her embrace, arms tightening around her waist, forehead resting gently against her hair. When they finally parted, she cupped his cheek softly. "No more secrets?" she whispered. "None." "No lies?" "None." "No disappearing in janitor uniforms without telling me first?" He laughed. "Absolutely none." She smiled, slow, radiant, full of emotion. "Then yes," she whispered. "Partner." It happened on a quiet evening, weeks after Fletcher's 5-star review transformed Lux Vista back into the jewel of the city. The lobby glowed under its golden chandeliers as guests checked in with easy smiles. Staff moved confidently through polished marble floors, and a sense of pride settled in the air like a warm blanket. Everything felt different now. Better, alive. But nothing compared to the change inside Harrison and Nevaeh. They'd grown into their roles as leaders, partners, and something more tender. Something they didn't rush, but didn't deny either. That night, after the last guest stepped into the elevator and the lobby mellowed into its soft evening hush, Harrison found Nevaeh standing behind the reception counter, reviewing the final reports of the day. Her hair fell loosely past her shoulders, and the glow of the desk lamp painted a gentle light across her face. "You work too much," he said softly. She looked up, smiling in that way that still caught him unprepared. "And you watch me too much," he chuckled. "Only because you're worth watching." She rolled her eyes playfully, but stepped out from behind the counter as he approached. The hotel was quiet. The world outside moved like a slow river behind the glass doors, and for a moment it felt like Lux Vista existed just for them. Harrison held out his hand. "Walk with me?" Nevaeh slipped her fingers into his, a gesture that used to send her pulse racing, now warm and familiar. They walked through the lobby, past the flowers she insisted be changed daily, past the front windows where she had once stood crying after being suspended, past the very marble floors he once mopped as Harry. Everything they survived lived somewhere in these walls. Everything they built lived here too. When they reached the center of the lobby, Harrison stopped and turned to her. "You know," he murmured, "I thought this place needed saving. But the truth is, you saved me." Her breath caught, and she looked away for a second. Not to hide, but to hold the moment gently. "I think we saved each other," she whispered. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "And where do we go from here?" Nevaeh leaned in, resting her head lightly against his chest, as his arms wrapped slowly around her. "Forward," she whispered. "Together." They stayed like that, two hearts finally resting after a long storm, while the lights dimmed and Lux Vista settled into the calm night. And for the first time in a very long time, Harrison Brooke felt at home, Not in his penthouse, not in his empire, but right here, with her. If this story touched your heart, like, share, subscribe, and comment the city you're watching from. Rate this story from 0 to 10. Thank you for listening.